Well, after running away from this game for over 2 years, here I am confident in having destroyed Outer Heaven twice. Yep, it's the first game of the main series all the way from the late 80s when the only way you could play it was on the Japanese personal computer, the MSX2 Plus, one of the earliest games produced by the insane Hideo Kojima. Let's just jump right into this thing. So, the game starts with Solid Snake infiltrating Outer Heaven under direction of Big Boss, who's been our Campbell in this game, the radio voice guide, and through his advice, our job is to get into Outer Heaven for an unspecified reason done in an unspecified amount of time. After that, the game loses almost all direction and becomes that open-ended item fetch game that the 80s turned around like crazy. Down the line, we'll find some crazy things like a bomb blast suit, and a helicopter acting as a turret, and then someone putting a bulldozer in the middle of a building, which is the exact opposite thing that bulldozers are supposed to do. One of the most important things you learn early in the game is that the game's slight RPG mechanic of giving you a better health bar is based upon rescuing POWs that have been put in various places of Outer Heaven. And you'd think at the end of the game that having 17 enemies running around and no more terrorist leaders would lead to the downfall of the entire system right off the bat, but apparently these guys just decide to phase through the walls and return to base after we free them. I don't know why they're doing that. I mean, I could appreciate the help, but the game's next objective after that is we find Gray Fox to finish what the Resistance started and destroy Metal Gear, the bipedal nuclear tank that Dr. Petrovich built for Outer Heaven, and we need him to tell us how to break the terrorist Tinker Toy, but he won't tell us until we find his daughter. Fair enough, I suppose, but if this was a modern game, I probably would have just done the evil option and forced him to tell us regardless by pistol whipping him in the shins, but that's just me, you know? If you played the NES version, that's where this game starts to fall apart, because not only was Dr. Petrovich being kept prisoner in a building that was past a second forest maze, but it's also behind invisible doors that no one ever tells you about. Same thing with Ellen, his daughter, so apparently that's how fair games used to be back then, and guess what? It's still bullshit today. Anyway, a bing, a bang, a boom, Ellen is saved. Dr. Petrovich tells us that Metal Gear is beaten by placing 16 plastic explosives on it in a specific order. How did you design a machine to work like that, and how did you possibly figure that out? As nonsensical as the weakness is, what's even stupider about it is that the game only tells you this once. So you have to write it down in real life to be able to kill it quickly, and it adds up to being one of the most bizarrely done dumbass shadow weaknesses I've ever seen, because there's no way it would work logically in-game. After the Metal Gear is destroyed, it's actually revealed that Big Boss was the bad guy the whole time. Of course Big Boss was the bad guy. He was one of the only people in the game that could actually move and do things, so it's a weak twist ending, almost like MGS5's end twist, since neither amounts to much. Apparently Ahab from MGS5 had such a bad time between Phantom Pain and now, that he not only lost his ability to hire mercenaries who couldn't fire a gun and chew gum at the same time, but he's also acquired amazing levels of stupidity and death wishing, because he could have easily used TX-55 to crush Solid Snake into paste, but instead, he's in the next room with a pistol and magic shoes, thinking that being on foot would be the best way to kill Solid Snake, even when Outer Heaven is set to explode, because the old military genius thought it would be the best idea to install Metal Gear into the base's core computer with an added blow up all the shit protocol when itself was destroyed. Now here's my theory. Ahab did this because he really hates his own employees that he personally hired to help stop Solid Snake, not thinking ahead of time that a rookie agent wouldn't be the best guy to follow orders, which caused this whole debacle resulting in the obliteration of Outer Heaven. Yeah, the story's a garbled menage of schlock at the end, since Ahab's whole plan of luring Solid Snake out here to collect false information on Outer Heaven and then pull the mission out of nowhere makes absolutely no logical sense on any level. You got a Metal Gear robot essentially sitting in an unguarded closet because the boss thinks on-foot fighting is more effective. You got an entire staff of high-level mercenaries on your Outer Heaven team with absolutely no ability to actually fight Solid Snake. You have vital items to Solid Snake just laying around throughout all of the infiltration, and you think that when he reached Building 3 is the most appropriate time to pull Solid Snake from his mission, even when he's been talking to the POWs and Gray Fox, who've told him about Metal Gear and how dangerous it is to the entire world, This entire game makes Ahab look like a giant glowing imbecile. But we didn't come to an MSX2 game for the story, same way as we didn't come to the NES for the same thing sung differently. The story of the NES port for Metal Gear is a bit odd because it wasn't developed with Kojima's supervision at all, and instead was put together almost by an entire team of translators instead of game developers at Ultra Games, because they took the original game and in the efforts to translate it well to the cartridge era, they've created a completely different game using elements from Metal Gear. Different bosses, the level design is jumbled up and put all over the place, and the English dubbing of this game is hilariously terrible, with one of the first text boxes in the game most likely reading, "I feel asleep." To compare the two is like trying to compare Call of Duty to Battlefield. The two versions look very similar and play nearly the same, but there are caveats all over the place, such as having alert status last or not, enemy line of sight, and design differences that overall means that the two versions are nearly identical in quality. MSX2 is more difficult organically, but the NES looks and sounds a lot better, but with the amount of retro game bullshit there is near the end, MSX2 does come out looking like the better. Metal Gear overall is a game that would have been well received when it came out, but it did not stand the test of time, and I'm sure some parts of either version were looked down upon even back then, but with the story being rubbish and the game having a downward difficulty progression to where it's arduous up until finding the silencer, at the very least, it has a solid stealth-based gameplay that was able to be worked upon and improved through subsequent games, and became the base for which games like MGS3 were able to blossom. And I know that ending was blurgy, so let's finish this by remembering that this guy, ignoring the use of Metal Gear TX55, used to be the leader of 750 expert mercenaries at Mother Base, which is indicative of Kojima's idea to develop a Star Wars prequel in his canon. Anyway, hopefully the improvements come soon as we hit the veritable scoreboard. Victory for gamers, everyone, you know? I actually enjoyed the game more than I thought I would when I started playing it.